Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We're glad you're interested in this topic. When I first heard it presented at the Washington Association for Library Employees conference last year, I thought that this would be a wonderful topic to introduce to our First Tuesdays audience. And from the amount of people here, it is indeed a subject that concerns many of us. So welcome. My name is Carolyn Peterson, and I am one of the coordinators for a facilitator for the this continuing education program. And we have two technical people in technical support. If you have any issues, please take down their emails or their phone numbers and call them if you can't hear. They're very good at problem solving so that you can take advantage of this wonderful program. Joe isn't in the session today. Oh, it's just Jeremy. So, and there's his phone number if you need to call him, and there's his email. So there we go. And today we always want to acknowledge our funding source. We are a part of the Office of the Secretary of State, and very glad we are to be under the able leadership of Kim Wyman. And that we get our funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and that is why we were interested in producing this continuing education program, which has now been going on the first Tuesday of the month, unless for some reason we feel that it will be better at the second Tuesday, but generally the first Tuesday for about 8 years now. So today we would like to, before we get started, we want you to do something. The Office of Financial Management asks us to do this. In chat, please, will you type in your name, the library organization that you are associated with, and if there is more than one person listening with you, could you just say 2 people, 3 people? That would be great. And if you would type that right now, then we can get started. I see we have a national audience, and that's great. So please type it in. We'll give you a few minutes for that to get going, and then we will introduce our speakers. So, thank you for typing. I'm seeing it come through fast and furious. This is great. This is a topic of great interest to lots of folks. So please keep typing. And as you do that, I think I will get underway and introduce our speakers for today. Melissa Munn is the Community Contact Coordinator for King County Library System. Melissa has a degree in criminology, and her previous work experience for the previous 10 years was working in the social service field with at-risk youth. She has actually been at King County Library System for the last 3 years, and she has been working with everything related to patron behavior. We also have Angelina Benedetti, and she's the Library Cluster Manager for the West region of the King County Library System. There she manages the operations and services of 6 libraries. These libraries serve the communities of Burien, SeaTac, Tukwila, and the White Center. She's in her 19th year as a librarian, and previously she worked in teen services and collection management. Angelina has served on a number of ALA committees relating to books and reading. And in 2011, she was selected as the winner of PLA's Allie Beth Martin Award for extraordinary knowledge of books and the ability to share that knowledge with others. So we're very privileged to have these 2 individuals share their knowledge with us. And I will be monitoring chat for them. So if you have a question during their that you want to raise, go ahead and type it in chat, and then I will raise it with them. I will draw their attention to it as we go along. So now I'd like to turn the slides over to Melissa and Angelina. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. That was an able introduction, and we appreciate it so much. We are very grateful to be here. You know who we are. And so let's just get started. At one time, library security meant gates and alarms, and those were to keep us from forgetting to check out our books. Now you can have even uniformed or even armed guards trained to keep criminal activities from disturbing your library environment. These kinds of all of these kinds of activities do impact particularly our own libraries, or the libraries that I manage in the King County Library System, although I know that these activities are very well spread. Examples: last fall, a raid in the park next to the Burien Library resulted in the arrest of 3 drug dealers. This was a shooting in the park of a library where I had formerly worked. And so in this session, we're going to be talking about these things, discovering how policies, procedures, and guidelines can support a safe and welcoming environment for patrons and staff. We're going to learn techniques for engaging staff in solution. We're going to discuss community and police partnership opportunities, distribute training resources, describe de-escalation techniques, and consider the impact of facility design in creating a safe library. So when we talk about library safety and security, we need to think about who the stakeholders are in our community. Who is it that is interested in having a safe and secure library, and who will be able to partner with us as we seek this out and enable plans to make that happen. So one of the things that I always like to do when engaging in any process is to start a stakeholder analysis. And with regards to library safety and security, if you were to take a look at a lot of the different potential stakeholders, these are some of the folks that might come to mind. If you want to get a little more formal, just type in stakeholder analysis grid, and you'll be able to find one of these where you can do a little deeper analysis of your stakeholder group, issues, all of this, all of the different pieces and parts, what their affiliation is, what their role, what would be particularly a win for them when it comes to a safe and secure library. I highly recommend, if you've got a little bit more time, to do this kind of analysis as well before embarking on any safety and security project.
Hello, so this is Melissa, and I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about kind of where King County has been in the past and kind of where we're at today, looking at our communities and our environments when it comes to safety and security. And one of the things is that the demographics of King County have changed drastically in the recent past. And like we know, all of our community libraries, we're seeing those effects in all of our buildings. We were once known as a rural and suburban library system, and most of our troublesome locations used to be only located in the south end. And what we're seeing now is that they're pretty much all over the county, from the north, from Shoreline all the way to the east in Snoqualmie, and then also in our south end as well. And KCLS was very intentional about the way that they took a look at the patron behavior issues, beginning with a security task force in, I believe it was 2007. It was before my time. But and then continuing with our Joint Labor Management Committee Safe and Secure Libraries project that we started last year, January of 2014. And so they've been very intentional about looking at what's happening in the libraries and how do we go about addressing those issues specific to our environments. My position was created in 2012 and really was focused initially on the Burien environment simply because of what was happening in that library. They were having high volumes of youth that were congregating. There was a lot of criminal activity. The staff were exhausted. The staff were worn out. And so when I started in 2012, the majority of my time was spent in the Burien library. But now I don't spend nearly as much time there anymore because we've done a lot of work down there. But and I do work with all management teams and staff throughout our entire system. So one of the areas in which we have control over. We know that we can't control who comes in our library buildings, but we can control how we respond and how the system can support staff. And so our policies and procedures were the first things that I really tackled when I first started. I talked to a lot of staff. I talked to staff and management teams in a lot of different libraries. And what I learned was that there was a lot of inconsistency in the way that our rules of conduct were implemented, the way that staff were implementing our rules of conduct. And then if they did ban somebody, the length of ban was varied. It depended on what library you were at, depended on the staff you were dealing with. A lot of staff didn't understand our differences between our bans and our trespasses. So there was a lot of confusion out there and a lot of inconsistency, which is, if we know anything about behavior of humans in general, consistency is the one thing that makes people and the environments change. So we took a look at our rules of conduct, and here's a copy, maybe. Uh-oh, I don't see it on my screen. Our rules of conduct policy, no, sorry. I don't know where it went.
Hang on.
Thank you. Our rules of conduct policy is really kind of simple. I've looked at a lot of different rules of conduct from different library organizations, and one of the things that I can say about ours is we generally have 4 rules of conduct that we enforce in our libraries. We've made them kind of larger umbrella statements so that lots of different things can fall under there, and we rely heavily on our staff to use their judgment in determining whether or not it's against the rule of conduct. So if you look at our rules of conduct, and you can't, unfortunately, but what they are is basically don't do anything illegal in our libraries. You need to listen to the staff direction. We want you to make sure that you're taking care of our equipment and using our facilities in the way that they were intended. And then don't do anything that would disrupt the library environment. There are lots of bullets under our rules of under each one of those rules. But just because it's not there doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't fall under there. So for example, we don't have, don't stand on the table, but it is unsafe and it's not the way that it's intended to be used, so it would be against our rule of conduct. You can see here too also the dates of revision. We have many of them. We're always looking at our rules of conduct to really look at how we can make them universal, how we can make them easy to implement and easy for staff and patrons to understand. So we have a couple of different ways that we can exclude people from our libraries, and one of them is a ban. We looked pretty intensely at our bans and trespass guidelines when we were looking at the policies and procedures, and realized that we had kind of meshed them together, which made it really confusing for staff to understand how to implement them, how to go about utilizing them to manage their environment. So we separated them into 2 different guidelines, and the first one is the ban guidelines. And the thing about us is we have 48 libraries, and we cover a vast amount of space in our state. So we decided that our bans are local. They're local to that individual library. They can range anywhere from 1 day to 1 year, depending on the behavior. And generally, bans are for non-threatening behavior, but disruptive, inappropriate use of the library equipment, and then non-compliance with staff direction. When we implement our bans, we use an instruct, warn, ban system. I don't know what happened to this slide either. We used our instruct, warn, ban system, which basically gives the patron an opportunity to change their behavior. We always go into every patron conduct situation with the assumption that the patron actually doesn't know the rule, and so we let them know what the rule is, and we consider that our first step. It's the instruct process, and we would engage them and let them know, you may not be aware, perhaps you didn't know, whatever phrasing that is most comfortable for you, but here's what our rule is, and we need you to stop doing that. And so that's our first step. If the patron doesn't stop, we warn them in the second step, and we tell them, if you're not going to stop this behavior, we're going to have to ask you to leave for the day. One of the things that's really important about changing people's behavior is giving them a consequence, and the other thing that's really important about changing people's behavior is following through on that consequence. So our third step in that instruct, warn, ban is actually banning the patron and asking them to leave for the day. You'll see our progression scale on your screen, and this is the same progression scale that every staff member in all of our libraries use. So we start every single ban with a 1-day ban. There are some exceptions in our ban guidelines that for hostile and aggressive behavior that we can skip to whatever length is appropriate based on that behavior. But generally speaking, all of our bans start with a 1-day ban. You'll notice that it escalates pretty quickly, and the reason for that is because each time we encounter a patron and deal with a patron behavior issue, we expect staff to do the instruct and warn. So by the second time we've talked with them about this behavior over, say, a week, we've already talked with them 5 different times. And so we think that, escalating it pretty quickly is going to be the best way to kind of implement that change in that behavior.
1 second. Sorry, I was trying to make sure another page was up. There you go.
Are we good?
Yeah, again, apologies, folks. It looks like we're having some network issues. It's causing some of the slides didn't want to load up to begin with. So I'm going to bounce ahead while you talk and see if I can get this uploaded.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So one of the other things that staff would talk a lot about is that when they would ban somebody, it was really hard for them to track the bans. Some libraries were really having a lot of bans and a lot in the day. Other libraries don't have very many bans at all. And so we really looked at developing a tool for all staff to use, which we call the progression tool. It allows staff to enter into a database the information regarding the patrons that that are banned. And so we enter their name if we have it, an alias if we don't have their name, but oftentimes, staff will give patrons a nickname of some sort. Gender, age, and race, ethnicity, and a description are required simply because if we don't have their name, we want to make sure that we can identify them down the line. We do ask that the staff write a pretty detailed description of what the behavior was so that we know whether or not it's a repeated behavior. And then we can track every time they're banned and whether the ban is progressing to the next level. So those are our bans, and those are local bans for a specific library, and staff manage that locally. Staff in the clusters can see all the patrons that are banned from all of the libraries in their cluster, but they can't see patrons that are banned from other library clusters. And so, so it's really localized to their patrons in their libraries. And then we have our trespasses, and our trespasses are system-wide consequences. And they're basically reserved for illegal behavior, threatening, harassing, assaulting, sexual misconduct, all of the things that, a police officer would come and cite somebody for or arrest them for. The one on the bottom is violating a one-year ban. When we've gone through the progression scale of increasing the bans, at some point it gets to the point to where they're not understanding and their behavior's not changing, and we can extend that to an entire system trespass. So we have an incident report database that we have staff document all of the incidents that happen in our libraries. We use this for a lot of reasons. We use it for insurance purposes is for one, but the other one is we track trends on what's happening in our libraries, for example, and it helps us make decisions on some of the changes that we can make in a library. For example, we are having an increase in needles being found at the Burien Library. And we weren't really sure what that looked like specifically. So Angie and I talked with their management team, and we decided that every single time a needle was found, we were going to document it. And that gave us the quantity and the number so that we can make a reasonable argument to say we need sharps containers installed in our bathrooms. So that's one of the ways in which we use the incident report to kind of identify trends in what's happening in our libraries. I review all of the incident reports when it comes to patron behavior. And so it goes through the staff who fills it out, and then the management team member reviews it and edits it if necessary, and then the HR person, that would be me, does the final review to make sure that it's appropriate since they're public documents. You'll see the list of things under the incident types of all the different ways in which people would utilize them. Disturbance is checked just because that tends to be our most common type of incident report, so we kind of automatically filled that one in for them.
So let's talk a little bit about how that translates, and all of that great policy work translates to how it is that you work in an individual library environment and with a particular staffing group. As we mentioned in the introduction, I manage the 6 libraries in the communities of Burien, SeaTac, Tukwila, and White Center. So those are pretty active communities. There's a lot of, if you take a look at police statistics for our area, they are those communities that see a lot of police activity. We have a lot of kids that come in and use the buildings. Those things aren't necessarily correlated, but they definitely add to the sort of general chaos in the environment. As Melissa mentioned, the Burien environment was one that was particularly acute, and when I came to work in the library about 2.5 years ago, the Joint Labor Management Committee, and I'm just pointing here, the Joint Labor Management Committee had made the decision that there needed to be a change in how the environment of Burien was managed. And that led to the creation of the Burien Safe Environment Work Group. The idea was that instead of having employees talk to the union and talk about the environment and management, try and get a handle on that, and that there be two sides across the table, that instead in the environment itself that labor and management come together and work on solution at the local level, so that it didn't have to escalate to the larger system union and system administration level to manage things that were really a local environment issue. So the Burien Safe Environment Work Group consists of local library management, staff members who are represented by the union, one staff member who represents the management union, Melissa, and the union president for our local 1857. So everyone comes together and we talk through issues around the environment in Burien. And that at first really started with the need for there to be more management accountability so that there was more transparency for decisions that were made in the environment, that staff receive training and more training in order to be able to manage the things that were going on, and that we start changing our language around patron behavior issues. So at one time, staff would talk about the need to, contain the environment and have a staff presence on the floor as, quote, patrolling. And that seemed to have a sense of being, sort of in a military cop kind of style, going around and looking for patron behaviors that are, were problematic, really sort of seeking out the problems, as opposed to just being a presence on the floor. So we went from having sort of a sense that, you're out there patrolling with the walkie-talkie and the clipboard, to a sense of just walking around, straightening the shelves, saying hi to patrons, just being available for help and a presence on the floor in the same way that you would be a presence on the desk, very similar to the idea of roving. And then if you encountered a patron behavior, then you would manage it in that way. So some of the outcomes of that Burien Safe Environment Work Group were a lot of definitions about how it is that we manage environments, manage the environment, how it is that we fill out different kinds, all of those different pieces of accountability, the progression tool and the incident reports, what kinds of behavior warrant each, right, at a local level. One of the things that came out of that, and Melissa alluded to this, was a really critical discussion, and it was very iterative. It kept on coming back every single month that we would meet. The question of how do we manage the drug use problems that we were experiencing in our bathrooms. Staff were really concerned about needle disposal and how many needles we were finding in the environment. So we moved to from training how is it that you dispose of a needle, to a more proactive solution, which was, okay, let's document how often this problem is really happening, and let's see if we want to take a different angle. And we became the first library in the King County Library System to install sharps containers in our public restrooms. So moving forward, I'm going to take you back to Melissa.
Okay, so Angie talked a lot about training.
Melissa, can I interrupt?
Yes.
We do have a question for you. And the question was, oh, I see you answered it in SharePoint.
I did.
Are you going to be able to share all of these? Could you send me the actual policies, or are they on your website for people to go and get when the program is over?
I am happy to send you all of the policies that we're talking about, our bans and our trespass guidelines and our rules of conduct. Absolutely, so I can send those to you so that you can share them.
Okay, so everyone, as all of these programs are discussed, if you want to tell me, send me your email address at the end of the program, I will forward you the documents you are interested in. So, okay, Melissa, apologies for that, but we will go ahead.
Great, thank you. I also have a form that kind of summarizes the training that we offer, that gives a little bit of a description and contact information that I will also include. But one of the things that Angie alluded to was the fact that we do a lot of training, and we do a lot of training in the Beery environment, specifically in kind of these small mini group trainings, which has really helped staff to understand and grasp kind of the concepts of the policies and kind of the tools in their tool belt that we're providing for them. And so here are some of the trainings that we offer, generally speaking, and they are kind of in, big bullets, but the verbal defense and influence, it used to be known as verbal judo, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. I learned about it when I was working in juvenile detention, and it's really kind of this tactical way of communicating with people, and it was intended and developed to be used by law enforcement officers. And I went to a week-long certification training to become an instructor of verbal judo, and what I realized in that process is there's lots of great tools and tidbits in there, but there were a couple that were really important that I took away that I kind of incorporate into all of the trainings when I do with staff, and those are the 5 universal truths and the universal greeting. And after I talk a little bit more about these different trainings, the next couple of slides, we'll go through those a little bit more in depth, because I think that they're really great kind of foundational tools that staff can use when they're engaging patrons in patron behavior. The second one is Prepare, and I don't know if anybody uses this program or not, but it's by CPI, which is the Crisis Prevention Institute. I'm a certified instructor as well as Danielle on our safety department, and Prepare is kind of our entry-level de-escalation training. It's a 4-hour training that all of our staff are expected to go through, except for pages. That may change in the future, but right now pages aren't involved in that because there's no expectation that they have any engagement with patrons on the floor. But the Prepare is really basic about understanding how people's behaviors escalate and what our appropriate responses should be to de-escalate or to manage the environment. It gives a lot of people some really kind of eye-opening things about, oh, that's interesting, when somebody is being really defensive, this is how I need to respond. And oftentimes what we find, because staff are in the libraries, we're in helping field, so we want to make everybody feel better, and we want to be gentle, and we want to kind of support them in their frustration, and really that's not necessarily always the appropriate response when somebody is escalating. Sound Mental Health is a community mental health agency here in the King County area, and I reached out to Sound Mental Health to learn about some training that I heard was provided by them for de-escalation. And they have an emergency management trainer and kind of staff person that does some really great in-depth training that we titled Cycle of a Crisis, and it really walks us through how crises kind of develop, what you can do before a crisis happens to understand what the environment should look like when something changes, when the crisis is occurring, what's your role, what's everybody else's role, how do you keep patrons kind of away from a crisis, and then the debrief process and understanding how important that is and what that looks like. So the Sound Mental Health training, I would encourage, even though Jennifer is her name, she may not be available to everybody, I would encourage, if you have local mental health agencies in your communities, to really reach out to them and find out if they have anybody that is skilled in areas of training de-escalation and have them come out. They have a wealth of knowledge, and they often are, they're working with patrons that we see all the time that have mental illness and drug and alcohol abuse issues, and so they have a lot of really great supportive and great suggestions for us to handle those, since we see them every day in our libraries. The last one, trauma stewardship, it's not really a training, it's more of kind of an all-day seminar. I don't know if anybody's heard of this before. Her name is Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky. She's from the Seattle area, and she does an amazing seminar. It's an all-day seminar on the effects of kind of that everyday trauma that we experience in our helping field that we work in. Patrons yelling at us all of the time, the stress of just the job of handling crisis. You never know what's going to happen, and maybe you've got somebody yelling at you every day, or somebody threatening you, or you've got people using drugs in your bathroom. You've got these issues that are creating an environment that may be unhealthy for you. And although we go home every day and we chat with our spouses or we do whatever, we hold on to a lot of that trauma and that stress. And what Laura talks about is how that impacts us over time. and what we can do to take care of ourselves, and how do we relieve some of that stress that is building up over time. And so I would encourage all of you to, she's got a TED Talk that's really amazing, and again, I can send you some more resources on that. But we've sent probably over 300 staff from the library system to go see her, and about 99% of all of the feedback that I've gotten has been that it has been well worth the all-day institute. And her name is Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky, and I will type it in the chat box when I pass it over to Angie so you guys can get it down, but I'll also include it in the resources. But she's definitely been one of the main things that I've offered for staff, because staff get burnt out and they're feeling tired and they're using their sick time and they just don't want to go to work anymore. And a lot of it is because of this cumulative effect of this trauma that we're experiencing daily. So she's a really great resource. So I talked a little bit about the verbal judo and the things that I took away. And one of the main things is the 5 universal truths. And this was developed by Dr. Thompson, who developed verbal judo. And basically what he said was all of the people in our communities and in our work and in our lives, we are different in so many ways. But we are the same and similar in these 5 ways. And it really is that all people want to be treated with dignity and respect. All people want to be asked rather than told to do something. All people want to be told why they're being asked to do something. People want to be given options rather than threats, and people want a second chance. And if you think about all the different types of patrons that we encounter all day long, you can apply these to all of them, whether it's a 6-year-old child or a senior or somebody who might be using. People just want to be respected. They don't want to be bossed around. They want to be told why they're being asked to do something. And oftentimes they want to give choices. We always suggest that we give choices and options because we want to give the opportunity to the patron to make the right choice. We want to put the power back in their hands to make the right choice, to do the right behavior. The other thing that I talked a little bit about was the universal greeting. And the reason why I love this so much is because it's awkward to walk up to people that you don't know and you've never met before, and you have no idea how they're going to respond or what they're going to react to. So this universal greeting is something that you can use for I use it in email a lot, but you can use it anytime you're engaging with anybody, and the more you practice it, the easier it gets. But it's really simple. It's using an appropriate greeting: good morning, hello, always with your name, letting them know who you are. Identify yourself and your affiliation. I always say on the example on the right, hi, my name's Melissa, I work for the library. They don't have a clue what a community conduct coordinator is, and everybody in the library is a librarian, so I don't even go into describing what that is. Explain why you're contacting them, and then ask a relevant question. So I noticed that your voice was carrying across the library and I could hear it at the desk. Could you please keep it a little quieter so it's not to disturb other people? It's very simple. It rolls off your tongue the more you utilize it. And the other thing that it does is it de-escalates before given the opportunity for it to escalate. Pretty much oftentimes, and I use this example regarding teenagers, the first thing they're going to ask you is, who are you? Who are you and why are you coming over here? Just by doing the appropriate greeting with your name and identifying yourself, you've already told them who you are and why you have the authority to address them. You've told them why you're coming over there, and you're asking them to do something different. So a lot of times you've pretty much answered all of their questions before they've had an opportunity to ask them. So another big job, part of my job, I guess I should say, is working with law enforcement. I did a rough count of all the law enforcement agencies in King County the other day or a couple weeks ago and came up with somewhere around 30 different agencies that I work with in all of our different library locations. And one of the things that is so important to know is, and I don't know if you guys have multiple jurisdictional law enforcement agencies or not, but if you do, and you work closely with them, what you will learn is that they're all different and they all do everything differently. There's no consistent system for law enforcement and how to do certain things. So working with multiple different agencies, it's really important to get to know that agency, how they work, and understanding that they, might have different requests from you. For example, some law enforcement agencies in our system want our library staff to call the non-emergency number for certain types of incidents, and others are saying, nope, call 911 for everything. So it really is in your best interest to really kind of ask a lot of questions around how best you guys can work together. What do they need from us to be able to support us in the way that we need them to? We don't have security in we have security in only 2 of our libraries of the 48, and they're only there for about 24 to 25 hours a week. So we really rely heavily on our partnerships that we make with the police agencies. One of the things also to acknowledge with them is that our missions are very different. They pretty much want to take everybody out of our libraries that we want in them. Our mission is to make access to everybody available and give them the opportunity to learn how to be a library patron. And oftentimes law enforcement is always saying, why do you want them in your library? And we do. We want all people in our library. We want to give them an opportunity to figure out how to utilize the library in a positive way. The last yellow box, and I'll just speak to this really quickly, and I don't know if I touched on it earlier, is that language is really important. Our trespass in our system means something totally different than trespass to law enforcement. We apply our trespasses system-wide, whereas law enforcement applies them to a very specific location and address. So it's important to just kind of ask those questions and understand how we can best work together.
Okay, Melissa?
I'm going to pass it off to Ann. Yeah, I'm going to answer some of the questions in here.
It was basically, do you find the question gets you the response you want? In other words, what happens when you get no? So Melissa or Angelina, either one of you, if you want to address that, please.
So the question meaning from the universal greeting, I'm assuming. I believe that came up when we were talking about the universal greeting. And I think oftentimes we do encounter people that are like, no, I can't do that. And that's when we would go into our instruct, warn, ban. I mean, the universal greeting generally is the instruct process. And if they're refusing to change that behavior, then we would just move it up the line and we would just say to them, well, if you can't change that behavior, we're going to have to ask you to leave. And so I think that it's always asking them to do what we're asking them to do first, giving them that option, walking away and allowing them to make that choice. And then if that doesn't happen, then following through with a warning and letting them know what the consequence is. And then if they still don't change, then following through on that consequence. I hope I answered that for you.
Angelina.
I just realized that my talk button was on through that. I hope there wasn't too bad of an echo. My apologies. And I think that Melissa, she pointed out something that I think is a really critical piece in any of these patron encounters, which is giving the patron room to comply. You don't want to stand there and wait. It does escalate things in a way that really, just giving somebody space, we always talk about last word versus last action. The last thing that they say to you is less important than the fact that after you've asked them to leave that they've actually walked out the door. You don't need to follow them and say, well, because you were disrespectful, you get an extra consequence. That just really escalates things. If you think about how it is that you wish to be treated in a time when you're in a heightened emotional state or have been asked to do something that you might not understand, we try and bring that respect back. So after that, let's talk about your library and the community. So when Melissa talked about the idea of police partnerships and community partnerships, really what it comes down to is how do you get to know what it is that's going on in your community so that you understand what those impacts are going to be on your library? So I'm just going to give a perfect example of this in one of my libraries. We just had a spike in criminal type behavior beginning. We went from one level of criminal behavior or disruptive behavior to something where it was just a constant influx of criminal behavior in the library, much more drug dealing, much more gang violence, a lot of stuff going on that we hadn't seen before or experienced, or at least at that level. We went from maybe one incident a week or a month to 2 and 3 incidents sometimes a day. What we learned is that at about that time that we started experiencing that the transit center 2 blocks over had started 24/7 police surveillance and security. So all of the folks who were engaged in behaviors that they shouldn't have been in the transit center moved to the library 2 blocks over, and all of we were experiencing that. The police that we work with in that community describe it as a never-ending game of whack-a-mole, and you just hope at any given time you're not the building that's getting hit on the head. So when we look at the library in the community, look for surrounding social services and drug addiction resources. In a couple of the communities that I serve, we have a number of drug addiction rehabilitation centers, both for adults and for youth. We have mental health services that are direct feeders from Western State Hospital in Tacoma. So you go from crisis to outpatient, and the outpatient is in our community. Know your hotspots and the proximity to your library. We have, as I said, a transit center 2 blocks from the Burien Library. The high school is 6 blocks from the library. Between the high school and the library are 2 places to just tank up on great junk food, the grocery outlet and the Dollar Tree. And so, of course, you're going to have kids coming in the building with just great gobs of junk food every single afternoon, and what is it that you're going to do, and how's that going to look, and what's that going to feel like in your building. So just know what the proximities in your library are going to do to your environment and how that's going to come out. Know your police resources, how many officers are on deck at any given time. Before they switched schedules, the department in serving one of my communities only had 4 cars for a very wide area, huge area, and every time you got a major incident, you have 2 cars responding, one to first responder, one taking the person to the jail. That is, if there's a couple of incidents going on at the same time, if there's an armed robbery at the same time as somebody's acting up in the building that requires trespassing, you're going to be way down the line on that 911 scale. So know how many officers are in your community and where it is that they're drawing additional resources from. Do you have school resource officers in your high school? And if so, are you friends with them? Can you be? So that as they see particular kids and you see particular kids, that you can compare notes. Is such and so kid having a bad week? Are there joint task forces? Are there gang units or drug units in your communities that are have particular tasks? Are there undercover agents that you will or undercover officers that you will see, in the daily working of your building? Are there off-duty officers? Are there block watches? One of the ways that we find out about a lot of criminal activity in our communities is by watching the next door sites. If you know the next door neighborhood communities, there's sort of a local Facebook for particular communities, and we monitor the ones that are close to our buildings so that we can see, join them as a neighbor of the building to understand what the level of criminal activity, so-and-so had their house broken into, so-and-so had their car broken into, so-and-so had vandalism, and that helps us understand what's going on in the neighborhood and our context in that. Okay, this one, what we're supposed to be seeing.
I prepped for this.
Okay.
Just takes a moment for it to load up.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy.
If you want to keep talking, we can wait for
well,
the load. You wanted to talk about the thing that was coming up.
Yeah, unfortunately, what you're supposed to be seeing right now is a map, and we were going to do basically the same exercise that I described with one of our other buildings, taking a look at the different factors that very much contribute to that environment. So the map is showing sort of a Google Map view of our Auburn Library. And the Auburn Library started really experiencing an influx of homelessness, of kids coming in and spending the day in the building, and that's because here we are. So let me point out, here we are at the Auburn Library, and the Auburn Library is in a community complex that includes this building here, which I believe is the senior center, and then you have your community center.
Do you have the laser pointer tool selected right now? I'm not seeing it show up on
Yes, I
screen.
do.
You have to click and drag it, or just click through on the screen for it to show up. If you just move your mouse, it won't show.
Oh, okay. Let me do that. How's that?
Perfect.
Click and drag. Okay. So this is the Auburn Library. Behind it is the museum. I'm sorry, it's a what? It's a museum, and then you've got the senior center and your community center. So you have a lot of activity, especially since here you've also got your splash park and a large public park. So you have a lot of civic activity. Then if you over to the right is HUD housing, and all of those folks come across the park and use the library. Then off to the left here, this whole area is AYR Auburn Youth Resources, which is for homelessness, or kids, homeless teens. And they, there's a community feed every night. There's also it's the main youth shelter for the South End. So, for example, Burien Library, which is one of mine, their officers will actually bring teens to AYR if they have an open shelter bed. So you have this real, I want to say, this clash of all the folks who are using the civic space here who then want to come and use the library, and all the folks who are looking for a place to spend the day who then also come and use the library before the shelter beds open. So, and then you've got the HUD housing piece, where you've got some of the gang activity that occurs there also coming in, and all of it coalescing here in this Auburn Library. So they now have a great, they've made a great coordinated effort with all of these different groups to have a partnership where they talk about the different behavior problems that many of them are experiencing in their buildings. Certainly the community center and senior center experience it as well, and the city with the park. They all come together and talk about it and are seeking solution together in a way that they didn't before. So let's talk, if we get to a place where whatever it is that we're doing in our buildings, whatever it is that we can do at the staff level, sometimes there are kinds of things that happen that really require a professional presence as opposed to whatever it is that we as staff are trained to do. So that can be anything from hired off-duty police, which is how we manage it in 2 of my buildings. We have the only 2 libraries in the King County Library System that regularly hire off-duty police are the Burien and Foster libraries, and I manage those. And we've had a very close relationship with those police agencies, and by hiring the off-duty officers, we have a much better idea of what it is that their reality is and what's going on in the community as they come and talk to us about, so this is what it is that we're experiencing in the broader community and how it's translating into the library. And they know all the players. If somebody is engaging in criminal behavior outside of the library and they see it happening in the library, they can recognize those folks. Another form of security is to hire a security company, a contracted security company. And some of the problems that folks sometimes, the upside of that is that there isn't a contract in the same way that it's a contract and it's not a hire in your community, or I'm sorry, a hire on your staff, right? In terms of how much it costs, it's a much lesser cost than hiring off-duty police or giving somebody a benefits package on your staff. The downside is that you really have to be careful about quality, and there is the perception that this person is just a quote-unquote mall cop. Finally, you have, this is an image from the Seattle Public Library. In their downtown library, they have always maintained a library hired and managed security presence. And so you work for, if you are a security officer there, you work for the library system, have a benefits package with the library system, and those folks are, in that case, you have a much lesser degree of mission clash because they are a library employee. So it's a little different relationship there. And in many ways, they're acting in a social services capacity as well, doing referrals for patrons as they need them. Okay, this is another one where we need the imagery.
Okay, so while we wait for this to come up, one of the things that I work closely with is our facilities department, and try and identify ways in which KCLS can do our part in creating an environment that does not encourage criminal behavior or behavior that is disruptive. So we have gone out to a number of libraries and really looked at our environments to figure out what's happening or what's causing some of the issues and seeing if there's something that we can do about it. For example, in our Redmond library, there was a lot of activity around the exterior of our buildings after hours and into the early morning that was causing some concern not only for staff but for our community and also the janitorial staff that would come after hours. And one of the things that we noticed was that we had power outlets that were outside of our building that were drawing people that were homeless or didn't have a place to go. I'm hoping that they're working on getting the screen up. So I'm just going to continue to talk until there they are. So for people that didn't have a place to go that night, they would come and they would hang out the exterior of our buildings, and they would utilize our power outlets to charge their cell phones or whatever it is that they had to charge. And one of the things that was happening in Redmond is that was causing a lot of tension between the people that were outside, and there were some fights. There was an assault with a knife. There were things that escalated. And so what we decided to do was, in those situations when things were escalating, we went ahead and capped all of our outlets so that we did not provide the electricity to the exterior of our building, and that was eliminating the draw for people to come and hang out outside of our buildings. Some other things that we've done is the landscaping. We added a lot of barberry, as you can see, because this wall in Burien is was known for teens just standing on and hanging on and sitting on and creating an environment that just wasn't welcoming for other members of our public and other people to walk by. They were being taunted and yelled at, and it wasn't cool. So we did some landscaping type stuff to hopefully eliminate that wall as being something that was attracting that. And then benches is another thing. We've looked at some of the locations. We had some benches that were close to doorways, and then people would sit on the benches and smoke. And so it was kind of creating this really unhealthy, unsafe kind of environment. And so we've removed benches in some places. Some other things that we've done is we looked at the diaper decks in our restrooms, and we've removed them out of the disabled stalls, and we've put them into the main areas of the restrooms for the parents that can use them. And we've actually taken them out of some restrooms altogether. If we have family restrooms in that library location, we have removed the diaper decks completely, and then informed our patrons that we have a family restroom that they can use. We were finding that people were hiding their drug paraphernalia in the diaper decks, and parents weren't super excited about that when they would go to use them, and needles and tin foil and stuff would fall out. And so this is the Burien Library, the propping doors open. We actually deadbolt them open during the day so that staff and patrons kind of have an open line into there. There is a wall there so that you can't actually see the stalls or the sinks, but it gives patrons a little bit less privacy to do the things that they're doing in the bathrooms. And one of the things is using drugs, which is one of the reasons why we installed the mounted wall sharps containers in our Burien Library. We also have recently installed them in our Bellevue libraries restrooms as well. So we've done some environmental type things to the exterior, and some of them, it's very situational, and we look at the whole picture as a whole before we make those decisions. And we haven't done anything across the system for every single library location, because we really look at the environment and see what the actual the reasonable response would be for that environment. There's Angie in our stalls. Yeah, and there's Angie in our stalls.
So looking at, if you want to take a look, one of the other things that we have done at the Burien Library in particular is to shorten the stalls. In other words, to give folks less access to the, so that if it's harder for 3 people to go into the disabled stall and engage in business other than using the restroom. We've also removed hiding places other than, notice that we don't have seat covers, and we don't have a shelf, for example, to put your belongings on. We were finding that there were a lot of that was again a place that was popular for hiding your drug kit. And then taking a look at different facility solutions for the spaces that we had, putting in mirrors for blind corners, taking a look at improving sight lines. We removed a significant amount of tall shelving and shortened it here on our 2nd floor in order to improve the sight lines so that now you can see from one end of the floor to the other from the desk. Also taking a look facilities-wise at the different kinds of stuff that you have in your libraries with new eyes. This is a fabric chair. We noticed that our fabric chairs are destroyed far more quickly than than something that is much more wipeable. We also noticed that if you look along the seam here, that too was a popular place for people to hide paraphernalia or to do drug drops altogether. One person would leave the drugs in the seam, behind the seam of the chair, and then somebody else would come in and use the chair and pick it up. We also have we've discovered another popular place to do that kind of dealing was the vertical file, taking the film out of a particular box and using that film box as a drug drop was something that was occurring. So just making sure that you have these kinds of things in full view of staff so that it's less easy for folks to take advantage in that sort of way, seeing your furniture with new eyes. So we have managed in the hour that we had to get through all of the different pieces and parts that we said we were going to in this presentation. And now if we want to take just a minute, if you have any questions for us.
You can type, and again, if you want to get the policies, go ahead and I will type my email address in there. I'll do it again. It's carolyn.peterson, and watch that I am in Danish heritage, or my husband is. So make sure you get the EN, and I will be happy to share with you the written policies. So any other questions? I think you did such a great job and answered the questions as they came along that I'm not seeing anybody, let's see here, I'm not seeing anybody type. Oh, well, we've got one person typing. Or if you have a mic and would like to use it, go ahead.
You've turned your microphone off, Carolyn.
This is the second time I've heard the presentation, and I got additional things out of it, and I certainly appreciate your willingness to share this with our audience. As you can tell, we had a big group, about close to 50 folks, who we all like that, and more information on the de-escalation. Oh, graffiti. You didn't talk about graffiti, so Patricia would like to know how you address graffiti.
I can talk about it to start, and then I can pass it over to Melissa. So one of the things, in addition to documenting every needle that we find or any incidents of drug paraphernalia, one of the things that we do is also document every single incident of graffiti, and also usually with photographs, because and in the case of what we suspect is gang graffiti, we always work with the police to check in and find out, are there other areas that are experiencing it. So we document, and then we work with police partners to see if we can find out what else is going on in the community. And then we just make sure that it's cleaned as soon as possible, because what we've experienced is that graffiti-like tribbles just breeds exponentially, right? If you don't take care of it, then there's folks who take the opportunity to respond to it. But graffiti is definitely a problem in all of our libraries, all of the 6 libraries that I work with. And in particular, one target has been our mobile mobile library unit, our little bookmobile library to go, is frequently tagged. And so we just take care of it as soon as we can.
The only thing that I want to address to that is that we do document it. I mean, there's not a lot of things that we can do to stop it. People are going to, you know, tag your building. If they're going to tag your building, they generally do it when we're not there. So we don't really have any control over that. One of the things about the Auburn environment is they have a pretty high incident of gang activity down there, and we communicate really closely with the law enforcement officers about when graffiti does happen, and that allows them to kind of track the gangs as they come through our community. Oftentimes, Carla, who's the cluster manager down there, will talk about how she feels like she's being protected when she gets tagged because there's a community of, there's a certain gang member that's kind of watching their space. Now, granted, they're probably using our space for things we don't want them to use them for, but at least the law enforcement officers know that that's who's in the community right now, and that's who's around our space most often. So, like I said, we can't do a lot to prohibit it, but you know, because it generally happens when we're not in the building. But we do definitely do a lot of communication with the law enforcement around it. I did see another question around the de-escalation. There is another training that I didn't talk about. It's called Safe Environment Training, and it's put on by Joe Fithian, who's the security manager for Seattle Public Library. He spent about 25 years or so in law enforcement as a law enforcement officer and a undercover person and all kinds of law enforcement experience, and now he currently works for the library system. So the great thing about his training is that he has 1 foot in law enforcement land and 1 foot in library land, and so he really understands what it's like to be working in a library environment and still having to deal with patrons that you know, you may need to call law enforcement, you may have to handle them in a certain way. And so he talks a lot about being aware of your environment as one of the main ways to de-escalate, because if you catch it really early, a lot of times things won't escalate. So that information will be included on the training resource page that I send you, and you can look into him. I know that he offers the training and travels around and provides it to different library systems for you guys.
Do you think he would go out of state? You've provided with the money, the funds?
I think so.
Okay. Sounds good.
I do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, other questions typed in or
I
asked?
see something about going into facilities with outreach. I just want to know a little bit more about what the question is.
Okay, yeah. Could you type a little bit more, Phil? Okay, Phil's typing. So we'll see that come through in just a moment or two.
And Angie provided Laura's website, Trauma Stewardship, and it should tell you where she's coming up next. You can also sign up for her newsletters or follow her on Facebook or whatever, and they will send you emails about when they are coming to an area that might be close to you. She is from Seattle, but she only offers an institute in Seattle maybe twice a year. Otherwise, she's pretty much traveling kind of all over the place. But she does have a book that follows her seminar pretty closely that covers all of her stuff that I would recommend people reading if you're not able to go to one of her seminars.
Okay.
And it's titled the same thing.
Okay, and Phil is typing. It sometimes takes a while for our, oh, here we go. There you are. Let's see, Tanya. She said Tanya is giving us thank yous. She's going to be looking for personal stuff, and then she's saying thanks. And Phil, here we go. We go into subsidized housing areas, usually a clubhouse or something. Sometimes we have intense situations, usually surrounding the area. So does that give you what you need there? A little bit more?
Yeah, we do an extraordinary amount of outreach in my cluster group, and oftentimes one of the things that we will experience is that patrons that we see in the library, we will see in that context as well. Sometimes somebody has been banned or trespassed from the library for a period of time, and we'll go out and we'll see them while we are in an outreach environment, and that can be stressful on staff. The thing that we make clear and try and as we do those kinds of outreach efforts, and also we will have we'll have some of these organizations, particularly the drug and alcohol rehabilitation, that will come into our buildings in an organized way, and we'll do some kind of programmatic response around that. In one of my libraries, we know that the adolescent boys from a particular program are going to be in every Friday, and so we make sure that we've got enough staff in the building to manage that, and also see if we've got books or programs that will be able to work with that. So one of the important steps is making sure that staff are on the same page with each other and that they've had those critical conversations with those community partners so that folks know what resources are available. Okay, if we're in this situation, who is it that we call? Who is it that's going to be in the room with us? Who's going to be doing any kind of environment control? How many staff do we bring to the event to make sure that we are responding? It just really takes a lot of that kind of prep work. Thinking through possible scenarios and then setting boundaries. If you're feeling that this situation is unsafe, just saying, it was great to visit and that's all for today. So we do try and carefully think through how it is that we're going to respond in those situations. A lot of that sound mental health preparation piece that Melissa had talked about is sort of knowing what your plan is if anything is going to happen, and sort of running through those scenarios in your mind so that if something happens, you can respond appropriately and not have it amp up so quickly.
Okay. Well, this sounds good. Thank you so much. I mean, this is great. Again, second time I've heard it, and I've learned lots more, and I could think, as you can see, you had a national audience, and individuals this is something that all libraries deal with, and again, thank you for being willing to share your great information. And I see we've got one other, so I think we'll let folks go, and again, email me if you would like. My name is on the contact page of the first Tuesdays, and we will have Jeremy generally has the presentation if you want to listen to it again. The presentation will be up usually by right around the noon hour today, so other folks can listen to it who haven't, who weren't able to come. So thanks again for sharing your information. As you can see, it was, Jeremy tells me we had 61 distinct folks in our presentation. So thank you again. It was a worthwhile topic.
Thank you, Carolyn. You and Jeremy have been great, and we were grateful for the opportunity to participate. First Tuesdays is awesome.
Good. We try.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I apologize for the network issues we're having today. I'm not sure why. I mean, even last week we were having some issues. I'm going to go ahead and reach out to them because typically, if there are any sort of network issues, it's very short-lived, and this one's been 4 days. So I'm going to toss something out there, see if they're even aware of it, and hopefully it'll be cleared up soon. So apologies for that. I'm glad we managed to work it out in the end, but just a couple of wrinkles.
No worries.
Well,
we got
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, we can't